Yeah, exactly.
No. Three, yeah? Actually, also, can you ask him to look for Gulshan? Can you ask him to look for Gulshan? She. And how about Russia? Russia?
Yeah, nobody's called in to do that.
Okay. Russia is Gulsh. Is Russia coming? No, sorry. Is Gulshan coming at the end? Gulshan. Oh, I saw them in the morning. They weren't coming to. Yeah, I didn't know that she was. No, they went to the mall or something because they didn't realize. I guess there was a session. Well, there's Ask Me.
Well, you'll be interested in this invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity like this cannot be taken for granted.
This evening, we are going to be beating our hearts out for you all, so I want to see people enjoying themselves. So get up and feel the music and do something about it, okay?
This event is a right of cultural democracy.
We have many, many partners, you included. I encourage you to stand alongside with us as we travel this journey year after year.
Good afternoon. How are you all? Isn't it an amazing day? Did you get to have some coffee and see the Falcon, etc., etc.? Yes, you did, right? Okay, we have a very, very important session today, which is making homes, diverse communities in the UAE. And I don't know whether, have you listened to some of the talks and seen some of the artists and people talking about the diverse community in the UAE? At this point, we have, how many communities do you say, how many different nationalities do we have in the UAE? Let's give a guess. Oh, you were at the talk. You should know. Arab, Indian, African, European, and Asian. All sorts of Asians. South Asia, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Philippines. Yes. That's a little out of range. But 200, yeah, that's amazing, okay? And in this last few years, the UAE has actually embraced the idea of tolerance of different religions. Actually, there's a whole accord with the Pope when he came to the UAE. And right now is being built by and designed by the same architect as the Museum of African American History. Do you know that architect? David Adaje, yeah? So there is a spot that has a mosque, a synagogue, and a church in the same place. So the whole idea of embracing people, tolerance of different religions. Now, moving ahead, the nation has decided that actually in terms of the future economy, it really is creative art. So they want to make it, foster that. So what has happened in front of my eyes, they have instituted a new golden visa. Now, this isn't for businessmen to invest millions of dollars. No, if you have a talent, and I have many friends who have gotten a golden visa, so they can stay for 10 years and pursue their creative career. So this is also another huge change, and therefore more and more people, and even I was teaching, you know that I'm a teacher, right? Professor Woodman, right? Who was teaching at Reside University in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Even after 10 years, I mean, what a place. I don't have to lock my cycle. People are so nice and accepting. I might want to stay. And Woodman, why haven't you put in your application for the golden visa? So this really has changed the situation a lot. Now, let me read your introduction to things, and then actually, yeah, question. Okay, that's a very, very good question. Yeah, we're told actually citizenship is a marker. At this point, you cannot. Others can. Well, it's not. I mean, rules are always changeable given circumstances. So we have actually previously, after you finish your job, if you're even working in the UAE for 30, 40 years, you had to return to your own country. This is no longer the case. But at this point, it is harder to go into citizenship after this. Like maybe, I don't know, to Singapore, I think you maybe can become a citizen. Though historically, there are certain individuals, such as the Zaki Nasibe, who is a major person in terms of culture, and was the translator for Sheikh Zayed. He is now a citizen. His daughter is actually the UAE representative of the UN, And actually previously I have students who come from Irani families, and they were offered citizenship earlier on. So there is a bit of history of people who have been there for a long time becoming citizens. But this is still a next hurdle in a way, yeah. Let me just welcome you again to the 2022 Smithsonian Folklife Festival. Yes, here we are. And we had 2 years when we didn't have it, right? And we also the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage is produced this, co-presented with the UAE Embassy. Thank you, UAE Embassy, and co-sponsored by the National Park Service that keeps this wonderful mall. You call it the mall, right? Yes, we call it the mall. And for over, how many years has this been going on? 10, 15, 20, 35, 50. Oh my gosh. 55? I didn't know that. I had the wrong. Oh, 55. 55 years. How many people have been coming for the last 55 years? I find them. For a few. You've been to a few. Me too, yeah. So for over 50 years, the festival has convened people on the mall to explore, exchange, and engage the power of culture and creativity in our lives today. Power, culture and creativity. We're talking about bombers and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's incredible. This year, in addition to the UAE, we also feature Earth Optimism. Have any of you gone to the Earth Optimism section? Please go and check that out. Also, we have a marketplace right in front of the National Museum of Asian Art, which is just to the west of the castle. There are white tents. Please go and have a look at objects that you can buy there. Make sure also to check out, share your stories by using the hashtag 2022 Folklife. The festival is made possible by the people like you. Visit festival.si.edu to join our community of contributors. We also receive federal funding, federally appropriated funds. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. And also from foundation individuals, in-kind assistance and food, recording, and craft sales. So we get something from those sales. So go ahead and please buy and have some food at the wonderful Folklife little restaurant there. This year, additional support is provided by the Tamashiv Family Foundation. We also have tremendous support provided by the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and international cooperation. That's what we want, cooperation, as well as the UAE Ministry of Culture and Youth. Oh, we have Her Excellency Noor Al-Kabi, amazing woman, works with UNESCO. She's the head of that, and also my boss at Zayed University, as well as the UAE Embassy here in Washington and Etihad Airlines. Now, also we In terms of the festival, strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for visitors of all abilities. And we've had some with these different abilities. And so if you have a need for accessibility assistive listening, things like that, please ask. There's always a person with an Ask Me button. There she is. So we can arrange those things. ASL interpretation, audio description, real-time captioning, and a variety of other services that can be found on our festival website, as well as there's a booth around the corner if you need that. Okay, now a few other announcements. How many of you have heard Noon, the amazing band, which is an example of this multicultural situation in the UAE, very creative. Yeah, so with the band we have Ratish Shada, Indian, who grew up in Dubai. We have Mohammed Hosni, who is Egyptian, who's been living in Dubai, and we have also an American who actually was in Dubai, and they've come together and created their music. There's a big show on the big stage. Normally it's at 6:30. It's been moved up till 4 because of the possibility of rain. Okay, so it's at 4. And we have a whole group of street artists, and we have calligraffiti and hip hop and breakdancing, a whole new genre of musical forms and performative forms. So please stay, not till 6:30, only till 4. Okay, and I think that's it for the other announcements, right? Yeah. Now we're waiting for some of our presenters. And especially Danabel Gutierrez. Have any of you been to the poetry workshops, Rooftop Rhythms? She also has demonstrated Filipino chicken in the foodways, but she has been a resident, she's Filipino, she's been a resident in Dubai for, I think, 30-some years. So we're going to talk with her about how she creates home for herself in Dubai. We also have other communities, as some people have heard in other talks. The UAE, the population, 80% are what are called expats, is a funny word, and 10% are Emiratis. So we have communities of course, South Asian workers often. We have South Asian professionals, Lebanese, Egyptians, Sudanese, all these different nationalities in the UAE. I mean, it's sort of like the idea of when the US began. You have people from all over the world. And so it becomes a very dynamic place. And there are areas, different areas of, especially Dubai, where there are South Asian communities. So you find South Asian food, activities, Filipino communities. And also within Emirati culture, we have a long history of interaction with different places. So good Emirati food, yes. Oh, was that Iranian food? Oh, yeah, Emirati food. Oh, what's the other favorite dish? Biryani. You know biryani, don't you? Is that a British dish? Oh, no, it's a South Asian dish. Okay, now here's another quiz for you. Karak chai, what is that? What's chai? Yeah, the Chinese word for tea, exactly. And then that's the word that's used in India. Karak, what does that mean? Strong. And that's a type of chai that's made in the UAE, and it's sort of like the national drink in the UAE. So again, there are actually aspects of different cultures that have been incorporated into contemporary Emirati culture. Rebecca,
Professor, may I interrupt you?
Please do. My goodness.
Thank you, Professor Woodman. Hi, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us. My name is Rebecca Fenton. I'm one of the co-curators of the UAE program, Living Landscape, Living Memory. It's my pleasure to introduce my close colleague, Michelle Bambling. Michelle has lived in the UAE for about 14 years. Is that right?
That's right.
And she's currently on faculty at NYU Abu Dhabi. Also joining us is Casper Matijic.
Correct.
Is that pretty good? Thanks, Casper. Casper is a recent graduate of the same university, NYU Abu Dhabi. Of course, you already know Professor Woodman well by now. And we've invited all three of them here to speak a little bit about their experiences living in the UAE for different lengths of time. I hope that they can reflect on what that experience has been like as foreigners making a new home in this place, how they found friends, professional community, creative communities, and in such a dynamic place as Professor Woodman was describing, some of the incredible cultural and national diversity found in the UAE. So I'll turn it over to you all to have a short conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Whitman. I'll just jump in first because I've been there a little longer, and as a way of introducing my relationship here with Casper. And Casper, you can introduce your story. But this impromptu conversation gives an opportunity to look at intergenerational reasons for people coming to the UAE and what it means to make home there. So I went to the UAE actually as an academic who was just putting aside my work to have time with my 2 young children and to discover a new place. It was going to be maybe a year or 2. I went with my husband, who was the Middle East bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, and he was based there. So that began the why we were there. Our children went to international school. And fast forward to last night, my 2 children, one has been spending time, he graduated from college and he's with his journalist father, touring around India covering climate crises and renewable energy. And he came here last night, and my daughter, who is now in a U.S. college and working on a ranch this summer out in Montana, came here too. And what did they do last night? They quickly came to see the festival. We had dinner together, and then they met all of their friends in D.C. from their time in elementary and middle school who are in D.C. this summer. So just last night's experience makes me think about what it's like to make a home in the UAE. I got to work, such a privilege, with this festival, collaborating with Rebecca and with the Smithsonian Institution to try to give a sense of the UAE, its relationship to the environment and cultural knowledge. And if you look at that festival, you really don't know who's from the UAE or who's from other parts of the world. And all the conversations are things that we actually all care about, although they're specific and different. Fundamentally, they're about the environment, the earth, about communicating with each other, trying to understand how we're going to make this a better world, what we can learn from the past, what is our identity in place now and our future. So that's kind of a brief introduction to what it means for me to be there. And in short, it means to be a part of a global citizenship, to have the wonderful opportunity to have Casper from Poland as my student. And I'll turn this over, and to have Woodman as a close colleague, and all these many people that I've been privileged to know over the years that are coming together here and meeting each other. So it's truly a historic crossroads, and it's a contemporary crossroads.
Hello, my name is Kasper. I've been very privileged to study at NYU Abu Dhabi for the last 4 years. NYU Abu Dhabi, for those of you who might not know, it's one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse college on earth. We have students from over 120 nationalities speaking even more languages. So chances are that when you're there, people will say something that might either offend you or you might not agree with. So it's been an interesting kind of ongoing conversation throughout those 4 years. You know, you meet people from so many different cultures, and obviously that also reflects on the diversity within the UAE. We have so many nationalities coming here. Me, myself, as an immigrant, obviously, going there to study. I'm a part of 80% of population which is not native. Only around 15% of the population is actually Emirati. And those people are displaying a great deal of hospitality for all of us. So this idea of NYU Abu Dhabi has been established by John Sexton, who's been a president emeritus of NYU, and Sheikh Al Nahyan, who is currently president of the UAE. And they said very memorable things. They've said, we want to bridge differences between different people of different financial backgrounds, of different thinking backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and then make this kind of generation of people that can tackle issues like earth optimism, or the issues that are pertinent to cultural memory, heritage, conservation of environment, art, craft, belonging. So all the themes you can actually see in that structure that's called the spine, and it's also the vernacular structure that I had the pleasure of examining with Professor Bumbling before. But I feel like coming back to the topic of diversity and kind of living as an immigrant in the UAE, it's such a welcoming place. You know, I moved there from the UK, so the change of climate has been pretty visible. And it's just interesting to experience a different place, which actually makes you feel like home. And you wouldn't anticipate this from the first kind of glance. But then at Sadiyat Island, the island that our campus is situated on, they are building multi-faith kind of enclosure with a mosque, with a
synagogue,
with a synagogue, and with the Catholic Church or just the Christian Church in a very close triangular proximity, next to the Louvre, next to the Guggenheim that's being built. And it's just such a wonderful kind of endeavor, the cultural endeavor, to include everybody, regardless of their background. Yes, thank you.
It would be interesting to open up a discussion with you all. What brings you to this particular conversation, your questions? I'd love to know how many of you have been to the UAE, or yes, a few of you. That's great. Or maybe have interest to go one day. And maybe your ideas about the UAE before you came to the festival, and having met and talked to people either who are Emirati or made their home there, maybe that's shaped your current perception or interests in the UAE?
We sincerely hope so.
Yeah. Well, actually, if there are no other, I'll add a little from my story. Yeah.
Please do.
My story is a little different because I grew up in India. And then when I came to the UAE, all of a sudden I'm feeling at home. Yeah. Because I'm speaking Hindi and Urdu every day, right? And also being able to go back and forth to India easily. And then, because we have a large community, there are Hindu temples in Dubai especially, in the old city. Where are they located? And Gurudwara for Sikhs, etc., etc., right behind the Qibla wall, the one facing Mecca, of the main mosque in the middle of Dubai. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if this doesn't happen in Delhi, you know what I mean? There would be a riot or something like that.
Yeah.
So I early on realized that it's a very tolerant community. And then I started to come down to the old neighborhood in Baskia, where there's a majlis of Emirati men, and eat with them every Thursday. They're so nice. And I'd learn a lot about culture in the UAE. And then here comes Diwali. You know Diwali, the Festival of Lights. Do you celebrate that in DC? Probably. So here we were celebrating Diwali in Dubai, and they're actually distributing the sweets. Of course, when we grew up, we always went to the Indian neighborhood and got sweets. And so for them, inherently, it's not a problem to have people from different communities. And I also have quite a few South Asian friends who have grown up there who are artists. In the last 5-10 years, Vikram Devecha has been embraced as a UAE-based artist. He's gotten money to get an MFA. He's now teaching at universities. He represents UAE at the Venice Biennale. That's happened, right? Also, his wife, who's a videographer, also a dancer, who dances Indian classical dance, but is involved with the local theater community. And though she goes back to India for artistic things, she really does feel that the UAE is where she can pursue her artistic career. Also for Danabelle, who you may have heard, she is very active with the spoken word community. She'll also be on stage tonight. And so I think for her too, her identity, her home is in Dubai, yeah. So, maybe you should come and try yourselves to come into Dubai.
Also the band Noon.
Oh yes, yeah, Noon, for those of you who have come, Ratish, Indian, grew up in Dubai. He's the drummer. We have Mohammed Hosni, who's Egyptian, came to Dubai 7 years ago. And we have Cody and some other bassists who have come to Dubai. So it's really there also that they can combine jazz with rock and also classical Arabic music in magical ways. And I think quite a few. How many of you have heard Noon? Whoa! Yes, and they're coming back. They are going to be here. Along with Ron, the saxophonist from DC, who heard they're going to play today. He said he canceled his other engagement, and I'm coming to be on stage with them again. Yeah. So there are many different communities now that also are more accepted. Also another story, with COVID, my majlis stopped operating. I was driving, and it was National Day, just this last National Day, and my window is down, nice weather. There's an SUV, and someone said, "Professor, tomorrow you have to come down because we're going to have a celebration for National Day." So I went down, and he was really interested in music, and he sort of coordinated events and dance and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden I'm hearing like dubkan, like, hey, wait a minute, that's not Emirati music. And then all of a sudden he's put on Bollywood songs. Yes, because they really embrace this idea of tolerance. And then they set up a game. So we had the workers, wallahi, the workers, the Indian and Pakistani workers, and they did a tug of war together, you know? So it's incredible to see how these things have changed quite rapidly and have been embraced by the larger community, to even include the workers who often are left out of our stories about Dubai. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And, I also would like to point out that home is where people feel at home, and many Emiratis come to the United States also to study, to work, and they bring those stories, their photographs, those memories back to their home country, and then they bring their children to the United States and to other places. So the students that I've taught in the UAE, I worked in a national women's university for 3 years prior to working at New York University. Many of those people have families and extended family members who travel a lot and feel home in the United States. It's a very